I'd like to welcome everybody to part 2 of the 5th annual Fans of Film Music. I want to give a very special thanks to BIMVid, which is streaming this all over the world right now. We're getting responses from people in the United Kingdom, about every other continent, telling them that they're seeing you guys, the previous panel, live as well. So thank you, BIMVid, for doing this. A special thanks to my graphics guy, Alan Dahl, for designing everything that you see that looks awesome. And thanks for a lot of you guys for coming out here so far. We actually have a couple gifts for the 2 people who've traveled the farthest. So I think I have an idea who that might be, but we have a nice thing from Blake Neely, which is a handwritten, what would you call that?
Score.
And you call me a film score fan.
It's actually it's a handwritten love letter.
Handwritten love letter. And Alf Clausen has a autographed Simpsons poster for the person who's traveled the 2nd farthest. So I'd like to welcome the artistic director and conductor of the Golden State Pops Orchestra and composer in its own right, Mr. Stephen Allen Fox.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here this afternoon. I really want to thank Peter for inviting me to come out and take part in this. I was here last year, not physically here, as you know, someplace else, but this has been a great location. But it was a wonderful event, and when he contacted me to host this one, I was very excited, and then when I found out who was on the panel, I was very excited, so I really appreciate this. And I'm going to very quickly go down the line and just kind of, you can see their names, but as you can see, we have Chris Bacon up here. And Charles Bernstein. And Alf Clausen. Nathan Furst. Mark Isham. Blake Neely. Heitor Pereira. And Geoff Zanelli. I just want to point out that sitting before you, many nominations for many different awards, but you have, as far as my count went, and maybe I'm slightly off, but you have 8 Emmy Awards up here, 2 Grammy Awards, multiple Annie Awards, ASCAP Awards, BMI Awards, and the list goes on and on with the recognitions that this panel of people have. If you take into acknowledgement that most therapists and psychologists say you have to work at something for at least 10,000 hours to be a professional. This is over 80,000 hours of practice before they were even a professional. Each, yes. And cumulatively, I added this up and I was kind of amazed when I saw it. There's over 200 years of professional experience on this panel.
That's cute. That's fine.
So by a show of hands, I'm just curious, how many of you started on an instrument or with music when you were like at an elementary age? Grade school, 10 years old or so? How many of you started in a school-style program as opposed to individually, where you were playing in a school? How many of you started almost self-taught to a certain degree? It's pretty amazing. You can see the variety of things that go on here. How many of you are like university or college trained for film music specifically? Now, how many of you have lectured, spoken, or have taught yourself at a university or a college, something along with it? As you can see, the universities pick the right people to teach these things. How many of you at some point have worked in a mentor relationship where you had a mentor you were working for that started your career and led you on the way? And how many of you have been a mentor yourself to an assistant, an intern, or somebody? Yeah. Pretty exciting. So We'll be a little bit loose with this in the sense of having some conversation and seeing where things go. I saw a quote by Peter Sellers that I thought was pretty interesting, receiving the Polar Music Prize. And he said, "Music is about everything else. It's not about itself. It's about everything else we care about, everything we think about, and everything we feel." And I thought from him, wow, that's pretty deep, that's pretty interesting. And for me, that's an interesting thing that I'd like to see how some of you feel about this. It's like the idea of what music is. Most of us think it's the stuff we're hearing, the notes and the sounds, but what does it mean to you? And from his phrase specifically, that it's not about itself, it's about feelings, emotions, and what we care about. How does that relate to what you do as a film composer? And only because I saw a quote by Heitor that was somewhat related to this, I thought we'd start with you and see what you think about music and how it feels and the emotion and caring part of it in what you do as a film composer.
Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, when I saw who I was going to sit beside, I had to ask, am I in the right place? Because they're all like adult composers, and I'm like, you know, it's funny. Lately, you know, life has been like, for me as a musician, life has been very generous, you know. So lately, I'm feeling like, I know there are many ways of acknowledging that, but how can I acknowledge that? But letting other people live the consequences of it. So I get involved, or I'm getting involved with like lots of charities that, you know, they've already figured out so many practical, instant ways of bringing, you know, more music to children's lives, better education, and all sorts of things that I feel that if they were deprived of it, years later, you know, that person could have become somebody else. And I know what music at a very early stage came into my life and made me who I am today, and I'm very thankful to it. So I feel that your answer, in a way, we can put it to practice, you know, like in a piece of music that you write and you feel that a friend is not feeling very good. So then sometimes I write a piece of music for somebody that, you know, is going through some hell, and I pop in, there's home, and I bring the guitar and I say, this, you know, it's for you, you know. So that's my way also of keeping music alive, and in a way kind of part of their cure, because it has cured me as well. I play like all the time as just for fun, you know. So I remind myself that even though now I live off it, that's not why I started on it, you know, in it. And so that's it. The sentiments, the feelings and everything that music does to me, I'm trying to always put forward to other people, because it has done wonders to my life. So that's it.
And you bring up an interesting point here. Yes. You said why you chose to go into it may not be exactly why you're continuing to do it, or there's something bigger than that. And if we can start down with Chris and come down, you got a little inside view. What made you decide music? That's what I'm going to do, and I want to be a film composer, as opposed to starting early and, well, I enjoy playing. What was the thing that made you decide, I want to go into this?
I don't know if there was a thing. I grew up spending most of my time on music, but I also loved movies. And the two of them together are kind of a magical concoction for me. And so it kind of, as soon as I could think about what I wanted to be when I grew up, that was it. And there was never a fallback plan, which is probably why I'm doing it, because there's something to be said for desperation. But as far as why I do it, it's just because I love what it can do. I love the impact that it can have. I love how rewarding it is to be able to go through the process of creating something with other creators, and getting to. It was really nice to show up to this room today and not be worried about anything, but that's one of the most rewarding parts is being involved in that process of real, breathing, living people who are trying to create something, and it's all in the name of entertainment, but it's really what it's about. And so I think that's why that wasn't what made me want to do it, but that's certainly what I continue doing it for.
And Charles, a question I have when it comes to film music, you know, we have all this music we love, and you're in a room here of people that have specific things they love that you've written, that this panel has written. And I'm sure all of us would agree to an extent with both comments that have been said before, but there's so much about being a film composer that's about being supportive and not being at the forefront. Elmer Bernstein said the best film music's the music nobody remembers. Mm-hmm. And do you find that to be true, that that's what you're searching for, the moments where you can speak out, but more, how do you decide, like, oh, I can speak out here, I can't speak out here, and what's this supposed to mean to that?
Well, you know, Steve, I got to first of all say, how special is this? You know, we're here, and the people who love what we do are here, and we're in this special cocoon together. It's just, it's a very special moment. As a couple of you were speaking, the attention, the degree of attention is so acute. I'm sorry to digress from your question, but I'm just feeling this. And we're in a studio where we can actually hear silence. We don't hear the street, you know. And I just wanted to ask if we can just for a second just listen to it, you know, just. Those of us, we hear things too, but it's just cool. Yeah. I'm sure you are the air conditioning, you know, but it's close to silence as we get. So there's something sacred about this. I wanted to point that out. As to your question, we're essentially, you know, it's interesting. I wrote down a couple of things that you said because I want to think about them later. One of them was this notion that music is not about, it's essentially about everything other than itself. In one sense, that's true. I've written 100 essays about film, music, and life. And the name of the book is Film, Music, and Everything Else. Because in a sense, it's the everything else that's what we do. Your question went to when to use it and when not to use it. Did I get the question right? Yes. Yeah. We're part of a storytelling process, and it's not about us. It's not about our music. We come into a film that you guys know, in my case, Nightmare on Elm Street or Cujo or one of those, and it's essentially without a certain ingredient, and we identify what that ingredient is. That's something else, and we bring it there. Our job isn't to bring what's already there, what's already on the screen, what's already present. We kind of look for what isn't there, and we try to bring it in. And that's, there are moments when that can happen, and moments when it's redundant, and moments when it's unnecessary. And we're collaborators. We work for and with other people. It's really not our gig. We serve, in a sense. So.
And anyone on the panel, with any question or with any response that someone gives, if you think of something, feel free to just interrupt them and they'll stop. No, I'm kidding. With talking about beginnings and where people come from and why we do it, you know, there was a time period not too long ago when there wasn't film music. And it's not that long of a genre with how long compared to history of how long it's been around. But now we're to that point, and I know, Geoff, you're one of the people that, you know, I read that you, from an early age, this is something that you want to be a part of. And I think that's something that maybe years ago wasn't the case. You know, people didn't look to go into film music and then they ended up there. But now that it's been around long enough. So if you could give some comment about what was it that drew you specifically to that?
You say from an early age, but not that early, because you see, I didn't play an instrument until I was 16. And I'm probably the latest bloomer on the panel. When you're saying,
Still.
well, now I'm 19. And when everyone's talking about playing an instrument at an elementary age, I often wonder what would it have been like if I did, right? And so and I sort of wish that I did, but at the same time, it created in me this drive that was like, I still feel like I'm behind. You know what I mean? And so there was a push. And so you saw, I was in my 20s when I wrote Into the West. So it's like I was going quick. And that's always been a part of it, because as soon as I got a guitar, which was the first day of my sophomore year of high school, I gave up homework and sports, and don't tell my mom and dad. But it was consuming. It was instant, and it was like I was playing 2 notes because that's all I could do, and those were the ones I needed as a guitar player. I was a guitar owner. Heitor's a guitar player. Yeah. but it was like it didn't make me any less passionate. You know what I mean? Like I certainly I just lived it and loved it, and I couldn't get enough of it. And so I had 3 years to figure out, what am I going to do with my life? And then it sort of feels almost like a retroactive decision, where it's like I can say now, I remember what it felt like when I watched Willy Wonka, right? And I must have been 7, 8, and I somehow realized this is a movie, this is a story, it's a musical, and the music doesn't exist somewhere else. It exists in this movie and because of the movie, and and that, that's obvious to all of us now, but it isn't to a 7-year-old. My daughter doesn't know that the Pink Panther theme means what it means, or where it came from. She just knows that's a nice piece of music. Someday she's going to watch a movie and go, that music only exists because somebody put it there. And that was the moment for me, was Willy Wonka. But I have to say, I couldn't have at age 7 gone, I want to be a film composer. I didn't know what music was or how to make it or any of that. It wasn't part of my life yet. But it sure felt like instant as soon as I had an instrument. So.
And bringing up an instrument, actually, could we start with Chris and come down? What was the first instrument you learned to play?
Well, I never really learned any of them, but the first one with piano was when I started on.
Piano? And Charles?
Probably piano.
And Alf?
Piano, then French horn.
And Nathan?
Like Chris, I'm going to say piano, but we're going to say learned very loosely. That's not a real term.
And Mark?
Piano, but the first professional grade was trumpet.
Piano, then French horn, then Alf, and then drums. But I gave that up. Actually, I gave up the second 2. But I'm still on piano.
And then over here we have guitar.
Yeah, for me it has been always like the guitar. Yeah.
And was that your first one at 16?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Guitar. Blake, a lot of times, there was even a question in the first panel about concept idea, where something starts from, and you develop an idea and you move forward. I read in an interview that you had said something, this is when you were working on the Pacific, and it had to do with having ideas and then having to throw them away. And I'm just curious, how does that feel after you've lived with something and it's a part of you coming out, to then either realize yourself it doesn't work or have somebody tell you it doesn't work and then you have to throw it away? What does that feel like? What part does that play in your job?
Well, it doesn't feel good, I'll say that. I think everyone on the panel can identify with that. But it's something you have to do. You have to train yourself to do. And, I write music for kind of because I have to. It's just part of me. And, I write it for therapy. I write it for myself. I write it for my friends. And sometimes when you write something, even for a scene, you realize that you might have sort of fallen out of the scene and you started this therapeutic session, and of course it doesn't work. You're tied to it because you think it's beautiful or you spent 7 days on it. But you watch it with the director and he's like, this doesn't work, and you think, all right, if I'm being honest, I was kind of frustrated with my kids, and so, you can train yourself to get rid of things for that. I have an exercise that I tell students, which is at least once a week, I'll write something that I really care about, and then I'll delete it completely, because it just trains you to not be precious about things. And there's plenty of other ideas you can come up with. And then every once in a while, when something's thrown out, you'll save it to a folder that's just for you, that, you know, you still get to keep it. But I think it's just something you get used to, because it's not, like Charles said, it's not all about us. It's about what works with the film.
I think we probably all also sort of trust that there's another great idea behind that, you know, and another one, and another one, another one. You know, I heard a chess instructor say, when you see a great move, don't play it, look for a greater one. You know, and that's a part of it. I bet every single one of us does this, and we also trust, you know, ideas come like a flood almost all the time. There's another one right around the corner, another one, and I think most of our job is deciding which ones to go and execute, you know, finish out and explore, and which ones, you know, we just simply don't have time to explore, because we would all write 40 hours of music a day if we could, but we can't. So, you know.
And following the same train of thought, Mark, in working with Paul Haggis, one of the things he congratulated you on in a interview he had done was your ability to reinvent yourself, and that you've never failed him in that kind of a way. And I'm curious, it's the same train of thought. Does that feel like a challenge? Does it feel stressful to say, okay, I'm sitting down, this is what the movie needs, it's not necessarily something I've done before or what is really I want to do, but that's what it needs, and then you go after it?
Well, I think, yes. I feel that every film has at least an infinite number of unique scores available to it. And I think because I was never trained academically to score films, I don't have any process that I learned that this is how you start and this is how you think about it and you do this next and step one, step two. That it was always just sort of by the seat of my pants that I got these scores done. That my first step is to find that unique thing for that film, that there is something that I can find that will, in a unique way, as Charles says, that will fill in that gap. And the way I've always, you know, I started off with just this unbridled passion to create music, not understanding it at all, and it was only later when I realized that, you know, I was so affected by music that I wanted to bring that same effect to others, and intellectually understood then why I keep going. And why it's such an interesting thing that we do is because, again, looking back as sort of an intellectual explanation to myself, it's that music is the most subjective artistic language there is. If you have a picture of something, that's a pretty objective description of that thing. If you write a poem about it, that sort of subjectifies it a bit more. But you start to write a song about it or interpret it as, you know, many programmatic composers have over the years, it really becomes a very, very personal communication to the individual that's receiving it. And I think that's the beauty that music brings to film, is because you have this collection of art forms all intermingling to create one message, to tell one story. And music is that subjective communication that can really go to an individual and make it very personal. And I lost track of your question.
No, you answered it wonderfully.
Can I just say to that point, what's interesting when you're doing this process is it is so subjective. You'll get notes like, well, it sounds too funny to me. You're like, that wasn't supposed to be funny. Or it's too mysterious. Well, that was the love theme. So, but you learn you have to go with their take on it, because, you know, you can explain all day that, well, funny music sounds like this, but it's how they take it, and they're the ones making the film. They know what they want. So that the subjective is very interesting. And when people ask me, like, oh, what's that piece about, I like to ask them what it's about to them, because if I tell you, it's going to ruin it for you.
And you also can't talk someone into liking a piece of music. Anyone who's ever tried, somebody somewhere doesn't like the Beatles. If you had that conversation with them, you know what I mean? It's like it goes nowhere.
Total losing battle.
You can't.
Total losing battle. You just accept the answer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I don't like it. Got it.
So with this idea of reinventing yourself, Nathan, you worked for on the film Need for Speed, and here's a situation where, if I understand, you approached it in a way that wasn't reinventing yourself necessarily, but it was reinventing how people might hear music in a film like that. If you could talk a little bit about that decision and how you approached it.
Well, it's definitely not reinventing myself, because if I were to approach it the way you would expect it to, then I am reinventing myself for sure, because that's not the more super edgy modern sound is not. I mean, it's not that I can't do it, which is what we would all say, but it's not necessarily my forte. And that worked out perfectly, because that's both the director and I didn't want to approach it in such a way where the second you're watching it, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm in for the exact same film I think I'm gonna see, So we wanted to. The angle was completely ignore the fact that it's cars racing and all that kind of stuff, and just try to play the emotion of the character and what's going on through him, and that way try to add another layer. Because otherwise, if I'm just playing look how exciting the cars are, then like what we were saying, then it's the exact same thing that Charles and I think Mark were saying, which is you're not bringing another facet to the film. You're just embellishing on what's already in the frame. So that was sort of the core of the concept, was to start to work with the big themes and to work with sort of emotionally visceral moments, as opposed to playing the screen. Because why not change it up? Because yeah.
Isn't that a nice question, though? Because a lot of times in the business you're in, you don't get the opportunity to say, why don't we change it up necessarily, because they want to go with what made money.
Well, right. Well, I was in a unique position in that way, actually, too, because I was involved before they finished the script. So I was able to sort of speak to the people and say, all right, if and when the suggestion comes up that it should be a hard rock meets hip hop score, just shoot that down immediately, because it shouldn't be. Let's turn this into something more than that. And the director and some of the executives and producers were right on board with that right away. So that was the benefit I had, was being able to get in their ear before the script was even done.
It's interesting, because on the last panel we had some people as well that gave stories of telling a director or producer, no, it shouldn't be that way, this is the way it should be. And having gone to school for this myself and knowing people who are trying to get into the business, they're always afraid to tell a director or a producer no. And I think it's interesting, do you ever have that fear of, well, if I tell them no, they're going to say, well, then I'll just find somebody else?
Oh, sure, especially if it's a new director. But this is a guy I've known for almost a decade. So that was so I have the safety of, we have an ongoing relationship and he trusts me. But yeah, if you're walking in and you're meeting this director for the first time, you're telling him what it should be, you're playing with fire. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do that. That just means you need to be very diplomatic and take into consideration that this person has probably been working on this film for couple of years, right? Because they're doing script rewrites, they're shooting, and you're just coming in right now. So whether you think you have a great idea or not, he's been lamenting about a certain concept for probably 2 years, maybe more, if it's like a pet project that he's been working on for a long time. So you can't just walk in and be like, no, it shouldn't be that way, because that's pretty arrogant, actually. Even when the music is your job, because music's not about music, right? It's about everything else. And so he has a sort of an emotional response to the material he's working on for years. And so you watching a rough cut or reading the script is not enough for you to walk in and say, no, it should be X. So
can I add something to the fire? And maybe I'm gonna fail terribly, but
no grades.
It's fine.
You're gonna do great.
I will tell you something that for many years before film music came into my life, I wrote every day, and I never titled the music. So you can imagine how confusing it became after like 10 years. You know that song, well, what else? So even inside my head, I had to already kind of start cataloging them by like what I remember I felt when I wrote it. So then now comes this other career. And what I find amazing about collaborating with people that, you know, music is not their first thing, but they have a sentiment towards, they have an intention towards it, what they expect it to do, not to themselves only, but to the audience and what it does to the storytelling and everything, that I found that little by little, by communicating with them, I discovered that yes, there are many elements that in music that you can actually give titles to it. And if something makes you sad, or you want to add mystery to the sadness, somehow you find within yourself what are those set of notes and harmonies and orchestration and colors that maybe brings you closer to what that person is expecting. But in her expecting you to give that, you discover in yourself, like I did, the names of all the music that I had written before, and I just didn't have feelings. You know, I just didn't know how to name these things. So to me, film music, it's been amazing because it's helping that cataloging, you know, sort of speak, you know, just to become more clear. So when I talk to somebody now, a new director, as you said, and ooh, here we go. It's almost like, well, there is a language that, you know, film music and all these previous collaborators have been kind of teaching me because of the conversations that come up, to just like communicate better, you know, to people, like what is the adjective, if it's to become a choice of notes and a choice of colors and everything. So yeah, that's what I want to say, because check this out. Because You Love It So Much, right? But it's not classical music, but it's not pop music either, you know, but it has orchestra, but it has elements of jazz, it has elements of ethnic music, it has elements of like our childhood, you know, from, you know, the little how you say, lullabies and all that kind of stuff. And we come from all different places. America, it's like Brazil. It's so mixed, you know, the races and the stories and the immigrations and all that kind of stuff. I find it's unbelievable how more and more that language is becoming clear to me when, if I'm not afraid of losing my job, you know, which I am. It's a lie, but I am not, you know. You are open and you learn so much from the people that don't make music, but you just talk about it, and you give the titles, and oh, it's been like so liberating, you know. Yeah, that's it.
That's always like the greatest part of the collaboration, I think, when you're sitting with the director and they, you know, we so rely on our directors to inspire us and say that one thing, and you know, that makes you go, oh, now I have an idea for the music, and then you start talking to them, and then they start going, that wasn't the idea I had, but I love it. And you know, you start teaching them an idea that they didn't know they wanted to need it for their movie, right? And you start learning it. You know, when I was doing Odd Life of Timothy Green, the director says, this is a movie about what your children can teach you if you let them. That's what he said in our first meeting. And I had a 2-year-old child, and I said, I'm not letting go of this movie because you said that. And all of a sudden I'm going, I absolutely get this idea. This little kid has taught me so much, and I thought if I was gonna get the job scoring this movie 5 years ago, I would have thought I could score it, but I couldn't because I wouldn't have known what he meant when he said that. And then I go, okay, sit on my lap. I'm gonna play the piano, you know, and all of a sudden there's like this, I don't even know the words for it. It's so personal, and it's so, I mean, I realize how pretentious I'm sounding right now, but it's so like, it's up there, and it's like this thing that happens when great music, or, you know, a music maker and a director and even a great producer, and they're all looking up at the film, and everything just sort of goes up there, and you sort of aren't even in control of what you're doing anymore. You're just doing this, and so is the director, and so, you know, and all of a sudden
every project you do is that way, right?
Well, the great ones.
You want it to be.
Love those.
You want it to be, but you know, those are the better ones for sure. Like, and we all have that same experience for sure.
So I was going to say, I want to work on these jobs that you guys are doing.
It's like, you guys can help me with
because there's a very kind of. I love what I do, but there's also a very logistical side, pragmatic side to it. And I think where you find success is when you're able to merge the art and the inspiration as well as the logistics of getting it from point A to point B to point C to point D, because that's just as much a part of it. Merging the technical and the mundane with the artistic. And it's great when the artistic is the driving force, but it's not always the case. Sometimes it's a matter of getting in there with, you know, you're editing down what was a fantastic 3.5 minute cue, where they've now just taken, you know, however much out of it. How do you turn that into a 1:45 thing without losing the heart of the music?
Well, there's art in it.
Yes.
Right? You are being artistic by just figuring that stuff out.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you had the 3 minutes, now, oh my God, 30 seconds. You do it. Not everybody can. So you're being artistic. And by the way, so sorry, I have to defend you from yourself, because you are a great musician, obviously, but sometimes I find that, you know, there are certain works that, as you said, you know, this is more like elbow work than creative, but actually it's elbow work because you've been so creative, you know, up to that moment. And well, this project, you are having to exercise, you know, the other side of, but you've been created, so now you can do this thing very quick.
Right.
You know?
I think part of that is also there are no shortage of amazing composers out in the world. There are far fewer who could do film music. And I've worked with other composers. Yeah, the schedule, and film music is just as much about the rewrites as it is the rights. You know, it's not necessarily the first idea. It's like being willing to accept that that's not the right idea, move on to the next one, and the art and also the craft of what it is that you do to turn the idea into what fits the movie, into what fits the director's vision that isn't your own.
There is a reality. Like, here, I'll explain the reality really quickly. How many of us on this panel have used an egg timer for a cue? Like, okay, I have to do X amount of minutes today, so I'm going to set the timer, and no matter what I've done, when that timer goes off, that cue's done, and you got to move on. Boom. Am I really the only guy? Am I really the only guy? Really?
But I'm going to try that when I go home.
It works. Because you spent all day on this amazing, you spent like a week on this amazing cue, and you completely neglected 3M14, completely. And you got to show it to him tomorrow, and it's not a super, you know, important cue as far as the story goes anyway. And it's like, this has got to get done. I'm setting the egg timer. That's it. And it's because I'm taking too long to write some of these cues, and I'm overwriting some of these cues. So
I want to say 3M14, real 3, music cue 14.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Okay. Yeah, go on.
Just in case you don't know.
So honestly, I actually loved it because it saves me from myself. Because otherwise, I've written so much amazing, intelligent counterpoint that it's the exact same result as if I just took my arm and went like because it's all so brilliant, right? It's such a puzzle piece of intricate movement, but they're all moving at the same time, and it's just a cluster. So like sometimes to save me, if you know, and it keeps me from entering into like this cathartic, you know, cute, you know, thing where I'm going off on a tangent sometimes. So it helps. I'm not saying I do it all the time.
I can tell that before we leave, you guys will hug every one of us.
So moving, because we need it, I want to take a moment. Alf, I've got to say, last night I actually happened to come across a YouTube video that I got a little bit emotional about. I didn't cry, but I was emotional. It was a YouTube video of the celebration during the recording session of your 500th episode of The Simpsons.
Beautiful.
You'll notice that Alf has a calculator watch on.
Yeah, he doesn't need the egg timer. So, first of all, congratulations to the success of all that. But as we talk about, some people are talking about reinventing themselves and doing all these things, and then here you've had a career where for so many years and so many episodes you've been able to be on the same project. And a question I've always had is that when you spend that much time on the one project, how much changes throughout those years that forces you to change, even though it's the same project and you're putting out a product that an audience is supposed to connect to the same way, but are there things throughout the years, whether industry-wise or people working on the project-wise, that have changed it for you and made it different, difficult, easier? And how does that feel so many years on that same project?
Well, the process has been pretty much the same throughout the entire run of the series. But I like this egg timer thing. I think that's pretty cool.
I'm never going to live that down now.
You know, being up here on the dais with all these wonderful composers, it's really something that, it's just, I'm in awe of the whole thing. And I feel like Elizabeth Taylor's 8th husband. Wait for it. I know what to do, but I'm not sure I can make it interesting. You know, it's funny talking about a director's viewpoint and a composer's viewpoint. I won't linger on this very long, but I have a friend composer, film composer, who worked on a movie of the week, and he and the director thought they were on the same page, and they hit it off pretty well. So there wasn't time to do Polaroids or interest in doing Polaroids. It was back before that all happened. So they get to the scoring session, and they record the first cue, and the director says at the end of the first recording, he says, Jerry, he says, I need to talk to you. Come down to the table for a moment. So he comes down to the table and he says, Jerry, he says, you know, I thought we understood each other, but he says, you know, your music is too purple and I need something that's more orange. And Jerry said, you don't need a film composer, you need an optometrist. So, I digress. Interestingly enough, not much has changed on The Simpsons in the time that I've been there. The procedure is pretty much the same. Receiving the spotting notes on late Saturday is pretty much the same. Receiving my timing notes Sunday morning is pretty much the same. Going through the fear of composing to a blank page is very much the same on Sunday. The turnaround time is the same, is basically a week. I look at an episode on Friday, and I take Saturday to kind of breathe deeply for a little while. And then starting Sunday, I start to write, and I write Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from 9 in the morning till 9 at night. Friday, we record those cues that I've written on that entire week, and we spot the next episode, which is then developing into the same procedure the next week. And one of the reasons that I've stayed on this show, other than the sheer joy of working with this amazingly creative group, is there's not much time for modifications, there's not much time for turnarounds, there's no time for Polaroids. Everybody know what Polaroids are? That's when you do demos of your cues to play for the director or the producer to get the sign-off so that you can actually move ahead and do an orchestration based on what you've come up with compositionally. There's no time for any of that on The Simpsons. They believe in me now. I've been there a long time, as you know, 25 years. They believe in me. The only time I see anybody from the production office is in the music spotting session, when I do that with my executive producer and showrunner Al Jean, and we talk about the episode from top to bottom, scene by scene, in emotional terms. We don't talk about, you know, I want you to score the chase. We talk about the emotion of the scene, which was mentioned over here just a moment ago. It's really a cool thing. So once we do the spotting session, which lasts for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, I walk out and I wait for my music editor to put the notes together for me, and I go to the studio on Friday and record. I'm my own boss. Nobody from the production office ever shows up. It's an amazing process for me to be my own boss and to call my own shots and cross my fingers that everything is going to be cool when they get to the dub stage. And so far it's worked out pretty well. Every once in a while they'll stumble on something, and normally they'll come to me and they'll say, you know, I really gave you a bum steer on this particular cue. I asked for this is exactly what you did, but I shouldn't have asked for that. I should have asked for something else. So I'm going to ask the music editor, Chris Ledesma, to go back into our storehouse of cues and find something that will fit what the guy really wanted. But they're all very collaborative. They're all very kind about that. They know what the feelings are artistically when you have to get a cue thrown out, which does happen every once in a while, but for the most part it's pretty good. We've arrived at, well, let me back up for just a moment. We started keeping consecutive take numbers at the beginning of the series for the ease of location of cues. And we just passed take number 30,000.
So that's 30,000 times the violists have said we need more click.
Perfect, absolutely. I figure in that amount of time I've probably composed 12 to 13,000 cues. So it's been quite an event, I'll tell you, and we're still going. You know, we're up to 550 episodes now and still moving. Greg's participated in a lot of these. We've recorded quite a few of them here, which has been great. So the question was posed of me, or posed of someone a little bit earlier on about what got me going in this business. It's been kind of an interesting development situation. I grew up not in a big city. I grew up in Jamestown, North Dakota, population 18,000 people. No one knew anything about film music or music, basically. I fell in love with Henry Mancini's book called Sounds and Scores.
Great book.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Which happened toward the end of my high school days, and I spent a lot of time sitting at the piano looking at those scores that Henry Mancini had printed in the book and playing the recordings that accompanied the book, and I really got jazzed by that. I was a mechanical engineering major for 2.5 years. Something changed my life. I had an epiphany, and that went bye-bye, fortunately. My mom and dad were very supportive of me, and they sent me to New York City when I was 21 years old to spend time with a cousin of mine who was a professional musician. He was a concert pianist who had studied with Arthur Schnabel. He conducted a choir in Brooklyn, but his main gig was to coach opera singers in singing dialects. And he and his wife from Norway wined and dined me for 6 straight weeks on the island of Manhattan and showed me the Isle of Manhattan. And it started with being able to see the original West Side Story with Larry Kurt and Carol Lawrence, sorry, just blanked for a moment. The original Music Man with Robert Preston, the original How to Succeed in Business with Robert Morse, the original My Fair Lady with Rex Harrison and Julie Andrews. And I went to the Randall's Island Jazz Festival by myself, and I'm sitting way up in the back, and I'm listening to this band play, and I turned to this little black kid sitting next to me, and I said, "Who's the trumpet player?" And he says, "Oh man," he says, "you got to pay attention to that guy. That's Miles Davis." I didn't know. I had not a clue. You know, it was really interesting, and it was the Miles Davis kind of blue band with John Coltrane and Cannonball Adderley and Bill Evans. Like, okay, I'm listening. You know, you got me. So I did that for 6 straight weeks and came back to North Dakota, and I lasted a little bit less than a quarter in mechanical engineering. Changed my major to music and majored in music theory and went to the Berklee College of Music and went through their whole thing, taught school there for a while, moved out to LA to pursue fame and fortune, and it's worked out pretty well.
Very much. The last comment / question that I have before I turn the floor over to the audience. I'm happy to say more and more of this music is coming off the screen and onto the concert stage, and Charles is a big part of that. And I know, Mark, you've had a lot of music performed of yours, and you've been honored at festivals overseas. And Mark, I'm wondering, what does that feel like when, as a composer, you wrote something that's supposed to be on screen and recorded, and now you're hearing it played back live to you? And I know you have a live performance background that you've been involved with that, but now here's this film music that's doing that.
Well, I think it's the best of all the worlds. That I was bitten by the performance bug when I was pretty young, and managed to maintain both careers for quite a number of years. So to go back and be able to have a full symphony orchestra, but be able to stand in front of it and perform along with it it's the best of everything. I think the one lesson I did learn in preparing for all of this is that a lot of the time what works well on screen doesn't necessarily the best in the concert world, and therefore there is at least for me, for my taste, I go back and I rework things so that it presents itself in a full communication, I should say, of the music idea. So many times in film music we sort of limit the number of ideas that we present. We space them out over more time so that there's places for dialogue and the other art forms that we intermingle with. In the concert setting, you have the ability, of course, just to be me and just me and always me and nothing but me. So you might as well take advantage of it, I feel. And so it's rewarding to do that. It's rewarding to take 40 minutes of music and reduce it to anywhere from 8 to 12 minutes of really the concentration of that expression, that musical idea. And then to have written something for myself to perform on top of it is, I think the greatest moment for me was I wrote a score for the De Palma film Black Dahlia, which was a really wonderful opportunity to delve into that world of film noir music, which I think is one of the high points of American culture. And I also hired myself, well, I digress for a second because I got the film because De Palma's, I managed to get a phone call with De Palma. It took me months to get a phone number and get an introduction to him. And he said, yeah, well, what I really want is I just need a mournful trumpet, a mournful trumpet score. And I said, well, you're in luck because I'm a really mournful trumpet player. And so he hired me, and the culmination of that is, a number of years later to actually have a suite of that music and playing my own mournful trumpet on top of it for an audience. I think it's the best of all possible worlds.
So at this time, we're going to turn it over to questions. Remember, one question to one composer. Anybody that breaks that rule, the security will come and escort you out. So make sure one question, one composer. I will do my best to try to respond through the microphone so that the people viewing around the world can hear the questions. So yes, in the black shirt.
I don't know who to ask this to, but because in a second, Blake, you made the comment about killing your babies, writing something that you really liked, but deleting it so you don't fall in love with your work. But I'm sure maybe a number of you have been in a situation where you've written a score that you really loved, but it's been rejected. Have you then taken that and repurposed it either for another film or like as your own personal piece, because you did, God forbid, fall in love with what you had written?
I'll answer that. The question is did somebody take something that was cut or removed from a film and use it for a personal purpose or in another film? And Blake?
I'll answer that through the eyes of the great Jerry Goldsmith, because I sat in a room like this and heard him talk once, and I've never forgotten what he said. He was asked the same question, and he said he wrote the original score to Babe the Pig, the movie Babe the Pig, and it was rejected. And someone said, will we get to hear that again in another film? And he said, no, I wrote it for a pig. So And that's exactly how I think most of us up here, I mean, in desperate times when there's no ideas maybe, but for the most part, I mean, every cue attaches for me to a scene that I wrote it for. So if I hear it in a spotting session and they've reused my music in the spotting, I'm like, this is totally wrong because it's, you know, the daughter's theme and the mom's and the, you just kind of know what you wrote it for. So it's really hard, even if it's rejected and you can use it again, to use it on a different scene because it just, to me, just won't glue to the picture.
What about then later on you are presented with a movie and there is this amazing love scene and it's the pig music, you know? And it's so freaking perfect for it. So it's weird. So I would say, as your friend, I know you very much. Don't throw your music away.
Bernard
Next question in the back, yes.
Oh, excuse me, just a moment before we leave this topic. I think that one of the most interesting examples of this is Lalo Schifrin's theme to Mission Impossible, yes, which actually ended up in a different project before Mission Impossible, and it was thrown out, and he repurposed it.
And now it's nothing but Mission Impossible. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Bernard Herrmann used to say never waste. Bernard Herrmann used to, from everything you read about him, and I love that guy, is he would never, every note was worth using. So if he wrote it and it got tossed out, I think there's even scores where you can hear, like if you did two scores at the same time, you'll almost hear some sort of cross elements just not in the themes or anything, but maybe in some of how it flows and how it moves. And I'll split the difference, by the way, between you two guys. I'll meet in the middle, and I wouldn't repurpose an entire piece of music, but I have taken like like some sort of ostinato or repeating concept or whatever that for whatever reason was annoying a director. Like it's too much going on or whatever, you know. Like I said before, I overwrite. So I'll save that, but I was really fond of how I had these two different elements sort of interacting with each other. So I'll sort of put that off to the side, and maybe years later, you know, I'll sort of remember that, oh, it was a neat idea, I haven't used it before, and it'd be perfect for this moment with this other theme that I wrote. So sort of splits the difference.
I have a story. So sorry. I'm working on a movie. I cannot say the name because it's being recorded, so I will go to jail straight from here to the jail. But I played, you know, I showed like many different melodies, and this person said, that one, and the rest, man, I don't know where you were with your mind, you know, they don't work, cool. And then I did like a video game, and by the way, video games nowadays are so amazing because they pay for the orchestra, you know, and they allow you to write whatever you want. So I said, hey man, check this out. I have all these 5 pieces here that I did some time ago, but you know, it's still music that I like, and maybe it has a place in your thing. And he says, play. And the first one he says, I mean, whoever said no to this is dumb. Right? So 2 days ago, there was an orchestra playing, you know, this whole thing, and I was like so happy, and oh my God, you know, the music got to, you know, live and has a chance now. And then by mistake, my assistant answered the call coming from the other person, and you know, and said, oh, so and so is on the phone. I said, shit, why did you? And so the music is playing. So the person, the one who rejected, said, if you had shown something like that for me, I wouldn't be making this phone call. And I said, well, I'm not sure about this theme right now. And I'm thinking, man, I've shown you that theme so many times. And so it's crazy, isn't it? Because it also depends on how people are that day.
You know, yeah, I got to chime in on that a little bit too, because when I was doing Into the West, I was writing all this music, and we're trying to write a theme for the Settlers, right? And Blake actually came and worked with me on that a bit. But I had written a tune. We don't like it, try this. Wrote another tune, and by the time I get to version 7, you know, I'm pulling my hair out, right? Then I get a phone call from the picture editor, and she says, no, it wasn't, it was from the director. So we screened the episode today, and I really like what you've written, the new piece you've written for the Settlers. And I went, okay, great, thank you, and put the phone down, but I hadn't written anything new. So I called the editor and said, And she says, oh, I just put in version 2 because it was the one I liked the best. And I went, great, so there it is. But it is, like you're saying, it's like, how did it strike the person that day? And probably, what was my demeanor in the meeting when I played it to them? There's so many things that go into it, right?
Yes.
And all of a sudden, this piece of music became Wheelerton, but it wasn't the first time they heard it. It's a really interesting, and it is about what makes music subjective, and you can't talk them into liking it, because I tried and they didn't, and then they did. And like it was all just about. And the other thing also that I'm not giving them credit for is watching it in the context of the picture, which is not what you're doing when you're just showing it for the first time.
Right. And
instead they get this cumulative effect, hearing it a couple times, or it's 40 minutes into the movie instead of the first thing you hit them with in the meeting or something. There's so many intangible things that go into how people respond.
Let's go on to the next question back there in the back.
Well, I was going to ask Heitor. Heitor, I know we just talked a few days ago. How you doing?
I didn't see you.
You have one of the most interesting, I think, starts of your story, the way we were talking about how you read a script and you will record yourself reading the script, humming the melodies as they're coming out of you, as you're reacting to the script. What I forgot to ask you was, what are you reacting to? Are you reacting to the dialogue? Like, what is making you start to hum a melody, like whether for Despicable Me or If I Stay? Like, what is getting you to start melodies coming out of your head?
So the question for Heitor is, what's the inspiration for bringing the melody out when you're looking at a script? Is that correct?
Well, the emotions of, like you're reading this thing and, they're in love and suddenly this other thing shows up and now they're not in love anymore and suddenly, I start hearing something and I said, you know what? Oh, let me be technical about it. I think it's like this, first impressions. Like this is an amazing musician, right? You go into a room and you play 10 solos. But somehow, man, the first one, there was something about it, the way you react, and we are in the business of reacting, and hopefully very fast, to something that's given to us. So I feel that when I'm reading the script, that's my first connection to that story. It will look different, obviously, from the way I'm envisaging, right, and all that stuff, but the emotions and the core of them, they won't change. So I sit, I play this thing, right, and on as like record, and I sit with the guitar, or many times I go, and I'm reading. If it was with a sequencer, I would already think, oh, it's the click. What is the click? What is all that stuff, that gets in the way of how I react to that thing? So that's why I sing to the script. I play, and most of the times, those are the melodies that become the big orchestra thing later.
Yes.
For Alf, probably my favorite episode of The Simpsons was the Sherry Bobbins one, the Mary Poppins parody. How is it for you to get something like that, that is, you're ripping off of something else, as opposed to coming up with something completely new? Because I thought that was you do that so brilliantly, and I love the Planet of the Apes musical. Those kinds of things, I'm just curious about.
So the question for Alf is, when you have to write something that is purposely reminiscent of something else,
well put.
How do you go about doing that?
Well, it's another one of the instances where you know what you're up against going into it, and you have to make a decision. Am I going to go along with this, or am I going to say I can't do this because this is stupid? And so more often than not, I will say I'm going to go along with this because I think this is fun. This is a really good time. My process is that I will take the piece of music that they want me to do the parody on and make myself some notes about what makes that piece of music react to the public the way it does, melodically, orchestrationally, rhythmically, you name it. All of the hooks on that piece of music that make the public react in a positive way. Once I have a list of all of what these hooks are, then I proceed to figure out a way of tipping melodies upside down, writing new melodies that have the same rhythmic structure, the same orchestrational structure, et cetera, et cetera. I have to be very careful, obviously, because some folks really don't like me to do that. But we've never been called on it. They enjoy me doing what I do, and they let me do what I do, and we all have fun with it. I ran into Richard Sherman not too long ago, and we talked about the Sherry Bobbins episode. I introduced myself to him and told him what I had done, and he says, "I love those pieces." He says, "You did a masterful job of that." And I thought, whew. I passed with the expert, you know. So it's just a good time. We have fun with it. A lot of them have been preserved, as you know, on 3 of the CDs that I produced of the music from the show. And a lot of moms have said that it's really fun driving home from school with their kids in the back seat and putting these CDs on and having everybody sing together.
Cool. Question there in the middle, third person in.
Yeah,
We'll come to you.
Geoff, you had to do that with Rossini.
Boy, did I.
Where did that all come from, and how did your collaboration with Hans on that score?
Oh, right.
So the question for Geoff is about Lone Ranger and
Yeah.
the Rossini and weaving that in. And
Well, it was okay. So here's really what happened. Gore called me long before they shot the film even, and he said, "I've got an animatic," which is, if you don't know, it's like a very rough CGI model of what this train chase is going to be when we finally get Johnny Depp in makeup, right? So it was 7 minutes long, and he says, we've been looping the William Tell overture, which the piece that everyone's familiar with is only about 2 minutes long of the part of the overture, and it just doesn't work. And can you come in and just kind of expand on it and just score it, but using that as a basis? So I did that for a couple weeks actually, and wrote this piece, 7 minutes. They dubbed it at Sony, like it was a big thing, and then they presented this, to Disney to say this is what the scene's going to be. So then the movie was finally greenlit. They went and they shot it, and he calls and says, "It's 13 minutes now, so we got some work to do." And in fact, Hans was doing Man of Steel at the time. So was I. But I had to go off it, and because I moved in over at Gore's place, and I just started getting into that while they're editing it, right? Because I thought the sooner the better, and we'll get this thing to be like clockwork. Which it was. It's very synchronous. It's sort of absurdly synchronous to the picture that was part of the gag. But the idea was always to take what we know is the Lone Ranger theme, we all hear it and love it, and kind of merge it with what eventually became Hans's score. And once those themes started showing up, I just started inserting them in bit by bit as they were being written. All told, though, that single piece of music represents probably 150 days of my life. So it went around a lot, right? Which, you want to talk about poor business moves, but anyway, it was. But no, I don't mean it that way. I just mean I've never spent that long on anything in my life. You can almost make a child in that amount of time. So, well, which I guess I did. Anyway, so.
Wait, you can do that in 15 minutes, actually.
It takes me half an hour. But anyway, we did all of the sort of interweaving, and it was all really up until even a week before scoring, we were still tweaking things because there were new pieces of music. The edit was constantly being changed, and then what I eventually ended up doing was taking the train sound effects and cutting them onto my click. So it was even so everything was like. I mean it when I say absurdly synchronous. It was meant to be like clockwork, and that was part of the, hopefully, underlying humor to the concept of it. But I tried everything. At one point, I tried to see what would happen. What if it was a heavy metal song? I knew it wasn't the right thing, but what would happen? What do we learn, right? And then I think only about 10 bars of it are the original orchestration. The rest of it had to be somehow sort of mangled in some reverent / irreverent way to kind of merge it into the rest of the score. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, but what I was going to say as well is that's almost a mathematical problem as well.
Sure. Yeah, the way I would describe, by the time we got near the end, and it was a beast, right? It's 400 bars or something, because it's a fast tempo, that any change of the picture editor would go, I just took 8 frames out, and it really was like moving the Golden Gate Bridge over 2 inches, you know, and it became so time consuming. And, you know, if you want to talk about the technical stuff that Chris was talking about before, that's it, you know what I mean? It's the same thing, and you do get lost in those details, but boy, I find that stuff important and fulfilling and interesting. And, you know, that piece of music and that scene in the movie kind of almost lives as a separate thing in a way. You know, people talk about it as, you know, it's the moment they waited for in the whole picture, and, you know, it sure was fun to be part of that.
We have time for one more question. You have a question, Peter?
Chris Macon, your Bates Motel, was there any talk to use Bernard Herrmann's music during that at all? I mean, that's such a famous score, and the whole subject genre of, you know, Bates and Psycho.
So the question to Chris was there any talk of using Bernard Herrmann in Bates Motel?
The simple answer is no. There was, I mean, the show is not designed as an homage to Psycho. It's not designed to necessarily be a prequel. Yes, these are characters and a storyline that we know what the end is. We know that Norma's going to end up stuffed in the basement at some point. That's all that's familiar. Everything else is kind of new territory, and so, I mean, it's set in a contemporary time as well. So the discussion was, we're not out to create an homage to what that was. That being said, and I get this with source code a lot as well, I think Bernard Herrmann has been a huge influence on me without me trying to emulate him. So I think there are elements of Herrmann in there, but no, there's no conscious effort to emulate that or reference that. And that being said, when we get to the point where Norma eventually is killed, bets are off as to what might go in that moment. But no, it has been purposely said, don't try to be Psycho.
Well, at this time, as Peter walks back up here, I want to thank all of you for this wonderful afternoon. And I also personally just wanted us to all take one moment to give a round of applause for Peter and his Fans of Film Music 5.
Tears away from that. We're going to finish our raffles. We have about 10 more to go. We also are going to show a trailer for a documentary coming up called Chasing Notes, about one man's struggle into becoming a film composer. It's about 3.5 minutes long. We're going to do that right after the raffle items. After that, then we'll do the autograph signing. So everybody stay in your seats right now. And we'll do the raffles right now. Composers, talk amongst yourselves first.